Randall.
Hey, hey, hey.
And I'm so grateful for you to be with us today and to start off our Proverbs Challenge. It's amazing. So, this Proverbs Challenge is here for young adults and anyone that wants to join in to discuss the wisdom. Basically, Proverbs is all about wisdom. And why I find it so important to share this, especially with my young adults, as a life coach for young adults with personal development and personal growth, it's important to make good choices. And making those choices really starts out by having a guideline. And Proverbs really provides that guideline. And Randall's going to talk a little bit more about that. But I wanted to thank you all for joining us and being with us as we are exploring the book of Proverbs to help you for 2024 to be the best that God has called you to be. And we are here to be, your guide to help you with a coach as a coach, to be the best you can be. You can't do life alone, okay? We are not meant to do life alone. We need each other, just like Mr. Smalls here, who's been my coach and has been guiding me all through 2023. He has been through the good times with me, the bad times, the in between times. It's been amazing, but I'm just so grateful to have Randall in my life, and he's been there for me through it all. So thanks again. And without further ado, Mr. Smalls, if you go ahead and just introduce yourself.
I have been called the Better Life Coach for a lot of years because I wrote a curriculum forever ago called the Better Life Course. And so what is a Better Life Course? It's the stages that we go through from birth till death. And so how to live a better life course, sociologically, a life course are those stages. And so how do you live a better life course? Not just, well, whatever life throws at me, that's what I'm doing. Now, how do you improve on it? So that's what we began to start talking about and writing about years ago. And so that kind of landed me with the moniker of the Better Life Coach. And so there is no better framework for living a better life than what you are introducing here today, the Proverbs. Because one of the Proverbs it's a little bit later, we're going to talk about Proverbs 1 for a second, in a second, but in Proverbs 29:11, it says, without a vision, people perish.
That's right.
So if there's no framework, like you mentioned earlier, if there's no framework, then people can do whatever the heck they want, and then they get all kinds of results and then wonder why they're not getting the results that they want because they don't have any guideline.
Right.
Well, the reason that Proverbs were written by, I don't know, the wisest and wealthiest man that ever lived.
That's right.
Solomon, he was a wise trillionaire.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any trillionaires these days. Well, look at all these billionaires. Solomon was a trillionaire. So the wisest and wealthiest guy that ever lived wrote down success strategies for us to be able to follow. Success strategies inspired spiritually. You've got to have a jump off point. You've got to have a foundation. You've got to have some guidelines, not just, well, anything goes. If anything goes, nothing usually does. Nothing usually happens. So it's a great privilege for me to sit here and talk with you today about this, Renee.
Well, again, thank you for being here and opening up. And again, we're going to just go right into it. Proverbs 1, and I'm going to go ahead and just say that, yes, King Solomon, he really put it plain about why we need a guide, why we need wisdom. And if you want to go ahead and just dive right in, is there a particular verse that you want us to hound in on, or you're just going to?
Well, let's take the first few verses, like verse 1 to 7. So if you look at this verse, it says it's the Proverbs of Solomon. Proverbs 1, verse 1 says the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. And here's what these things are good for. Somebody may say, well, Miss Renee, why should I look at Proverbs? Well, let's see if within the first few verses, if it gives us any reasons why we should. Okay? It says, for attaining wisdom, discipline, understanding, insight, prudence, what's right, what's just, what's fair, knowledge, discretion, And it says in verse 5, let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. And I want to pause there in verse 6 for a second. So, wisdom, I heard it said one time, is the on earth as it is in heaven kind of living.
That's
People
great.
talk about how, on earth as it is in heaven. It's just it was just a heaven on earth experience. That's the best that you can get on earth. If someone describes something as it was like, oh, that dessert, it was like heaven. I mean, that's the best you can get. So the practicalities, the success strategies, these success steps and guidelines that Solomon wrote down are how to bring heaven into your earthly existence. So how to have things like, hold on, I might cuss, discipline in your life. What? No, I don't. Turn that thing off. I don't want to hear any more about it.
Nobody likes to hear about discipline.
Don't be saying that. I was liking you up until that point. Then we go and talk about discipline. Yeah, discipline. Look at that. Wisdom, discipline, understanding. I will say, Miss Renee, from having done this for several decades, being a coach and being involved in helping people through things, the number one, hands down, number one question, number one request for me to pray for somebody, number one topic of discussion is for guidance.
Right.
How do I know what to do? And those things are all in here. The framework is what Solomon wrote down. He said, discipline, understanding, insight. If you have insight, right? If you have insight into a situation, then you get what is frequently known as the FAQs handled for you. The FAQs, right? Frequently asked
questions.
Right? What are the most frequently asked questions? Who, what, when, where, why, and how? And if you can get those answered, if you can have a framework with which to answer those, then you're going to make the right choices 100% of the time. Because if you're just throwing darts, trying to make a decision, you put up all the colleges that sound interesting to you on the wall and you're throwing a dart. Oh, well, I guess it's UCF. I'm going to UCF. That's it. Because the dart landed closest to it, even though it didn't even stick to the wall. You're just going, well, I guess that was it.
Yeah.
Or, well, I saw, my friend posted something from the holistic psychologist and it just really moved. Okay, whatever. No, get something tangible. That's what this book is for. It's a guideline. Right?
True.
So the who, what, when, where, why, and how begin to get answered from this thing. Insight into life, guidance. And specifically, because I've studied Proverbs a lot, one of the main reasons that Solomon wrote it was for young people. That's the input. He's like, I want the young to get discerning, to get guidance, to know what to do, when to do, how to do, where to do, and with whom. All of those questions. So if you think about this, if you consider possibilities from a wisdom standpoint, what would be the wisest thing to do? And I know a lot of times when we think of wise, we think of some old guy with a long white beard who's stroking his beard, sitting up on top of a mountain, and like people climb up the mountain to go, oh, wise one, what should I do? No, wisdom is like how I move through the world. What is the absolute smartest thing to do? Even if I don't have all of the information, with what I have now, what's the wisest thing to do? You'll make the right choices if you have a structure like this that Solomon wrote down for us. Isn't that it's kind of like, it's like you get an inside track on things.
Just like the answers to the test questions.
I was hoping you would go there. You're in your ability. I was hoping I set you up. I lofted that too.
You did. We didn't even rehearse that. But I love what you said about choices. And a lot of our young folks are making choices. And, I like to look at also wisdom as making decisions today that, are going to have good outcomes tomorrow. And so we're not sitting there of a life of regret or I shoulda, woulda, coulda type thing. And what way better to go ahead and just have a guide, like you said. It's like having that study guide before the test. You're like, well, what's going to be on that test? Well, if this comes on the test, then I know how to answer it because it's right here. And especially with our young people, again, I keep hearing, especially with my young ladies, about relationships. How do I know that this is the guy? Or, and then again, everyone is wondering what their purpose, what should I be doing? Especially when they graduate out of high school, and again, the Proverbs is there to help you with those decisions.
Right. Yeah.
So.
The verse, we said all of the things that Proverbs are for in those first 6 verses. Okay, what's the glue that holds them all together from Proverbs 1 all the way to Proverbs 31? It's verse 7. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Yes.
The fear of the Lord. Well, the fear of the Lord. I ain't afraid of nothing. Well, that's not the fear we're talking about. We're talking about having a standard in your life, a reverence for God. And that's lost on a lot of people where they're like, well, you do what feels good. If it feels good, do it. No, you need to have morals. You need to have values. You need to have standards. You need to have character. You need to have integrity. I remember an old statement forever ago that's always stuck with me that said, if you have character, people will never forget it.
Right.
If you don't have character, people will never forget it.
That's absolutely right.
So whether you have integrity, meaning you have a strong high moral code, there's that, and that we need that to guide us. But here's what's interesting in the Proverbs. The Bible itself, because the Proverbs are located in the Bible, but the Bible tells us later in the New Testament, it's in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 12, it says the word of God. So this is the word of God. This is not just like somebody wrote a great self-help book. The Proverbs written down in the Bible were Solomon's experience, who God gave him wisdom. God came to him in a dream and said, he was a very, very young man beginning to rule in his father's throne. And God said to him in the dream, said, what do you want, Solomon? And Solomon, as a young man, said, I'm just a young man. I don't know how to do this.
Right.
I need wisdom. And God said, no one will ever be known as wise as you. And because you asked me for wisdom, I'm going to give you all of the things that you didn't ask for. I'm going to give you wealth. No one will ever have as much wealth as you. And I'm going to give you victory over all of your enemies. He gave him everything he didn't ask for. Where does it start? It starts in that recollection and looking to God as your standard. And and if we look to him for that wisdom, then everything else works out. Because if you just take that statement, the fear of the Lord is the beginning.
Right.
The Lord is the beginning. So that verse I was referring to in Hebrews, it says the word of God is living and active. So when you read it, you're not just reading that's a great ancient writing that somebody wrote down about things and, good self-help stuff. No, this is alive.
It is.
This book is alive, right? I mean, how many times can you read the same thing and you've read it 14 times and then the 15th time you see something completely different?
What?
How did I miss that before?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Yeah. It's because it's alive. When you look at the Proverbs, God himself is in front of you and wants to show you insight into the world. He helps you get to know him. And as you know him, then you're going to make better choices increasingly all the way through.
Right. And then I'm glad you just summed it up. That's basically it. It's just helping you with life decisions. We're all going to have life happen to us. How do we deal with that? So thank you so much for introducing that Proverbs and why we study it. Because again, we all need it. We all need that wisdom. We all need the wisdom.
I I
So
will I will say as we come in for a landing is that
yeah,
something that somebody suggested me so long ago that I would suggest to anyone watching is that there are 31 proverbs. There's one for every day of the month.
right.
If you will commit to reading the proverb of the day, whatever day it is, if you know, if it's the 14th of the month, read the 14th proverb. The 21st of the month, read the 21st proverb, and do that throughout this year. I promise you, unquestionably, your life will be completely different at the end of the year. It won't have to wait until the end of the year, but it will be markedly different at the end of the year.
I'm
Just
glad because that's something that was brought to me years ago, and even with my boys, we were doing proverbs a day, and to this day they are still doing it because they are realizing that they're in their professions now, and they can use that for life. And it's not something that it's been planted years ago, but now they're still using it to this day. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. So that is what the Proverbs Challenge, Pathway to Wisdom, with Renee is doing this month of January with everyone, and having wonderful Randal Smalls to start off. We're going to have a lot of guest speakers come on, and we're going to talk about relationships, character, integrity, even finances, because that's what the Proverbs does. It helps you with dealing with your neighbor, the ones that are kind of, sometimes hard to love, but you got to love them anyway. The Proverbs talks about all of that. So I'm very excited, and I'm so grateful you were here to kick off this month with us. And thank you again for being here.
thank you. Anyone who wants to catch up with us on the other side, go to betterlifecourse.com. We have hundreds of hours of free resources to help you live an increasingly better life. Check us out.
All right, guys, how awesome was that? That was Proverbs Challenge Chapter 1 with Miss Renee Rogers and special guest Randal Smalls. I cannot speak for you or for anybody else, but I know for me, I gained so much wisdom from that segment, and I am looking forward to Chapter 2. We're going to be meeting right back here, same time tomorrow. Be sure to tune in.